I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. of the Glendora City Council. I am the mayor, I'm David Friedendahl, and I will serve as the presiding officer of these proceedings. In consideration of others, I'd ask that you silence any phones or electronic devices and refrain from speaking unless recognized. If you are in attendance and wish to speak during the public speaker portion, there are speaker cards. They look like this. They're at the back counter. If you would kindly complete the card and submit it to our recording admin prior to the conclusion of public comments, we would appreciate that. Again, this is a public meeting of the community of Glendora, and we appreciate and respect your participation here this evening. For the record, all members of the council are present and ready to conduct our business. To start off our proceedings, we'd like to have an invocation offered tonight by Pastor Dr. Michael Kordich of the First Baptist Church of Glendora, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by St. Lucy's Priory High School student Julie Michael. So if you'd all please stand, and Pastor Kordich, welcome.
Would you pray with me? Lord, as we know that there are many times there are transitions in our own lives, we know there are transitions in our city. And as we drive around and look around, we see that there are some businesses who are closing, but we see others who are opening. And Lord, just marks a transition in our community. So Lord, we just pray for this transitions that are occurring now. And we ask, Lord, that you would be gracious to us as a community to expand the work of those who are doing business in this community. Lord, I want to take the time to pray for our city workers who are behind the scenes and often unknown to us, but they are the ones that are keeping the city working from day to day. We ask, Lord, for your grace and your grace to be upon them. We do so also pray for our first responders and ask for you to be with them, to keep them safe. And finally, Lord, we ask that your wisdom and grace would be upon our city council members as they serve us in representing us in the operations of our community and the decisions that have to be made for our community. We ask, Lord, that you would give them the wisdom they need to uphold your righteous standards. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in saying the flag salute. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Julie and Pastor Kordich. It's always a pleasure. Our next item will be fun news. Our high school student ambassadors will report out on what's happening recently and coming up in their respective high schools. And I know Julie Michael is here from St. Lucy's Priory, so I'll begin with you. Welcome back.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm a Regent Ambassador at St. Lucy's. In February, St. Lucy's opened the month with our leadership, which includes Regent Ambassadors, Benedictine leaders, class office, and ASB members attending a leadership conference in Disneyland. They were able to listen to motivational speakers and learn how to be the best leaders they can be on campus through planning new events and listening to other schools' ideas. In the same week, we hosted our Visual and Performing Arts Showcase and second annual Clothing Design Fashion Show. Our clothing design teacher, Ms. Castro, put together a beautifully run fashion show in order to promote each of her students' designs, with fun rally games and fierce catwalks to keep every student engaged and having fun. Additionally, it was a shadow day for future regents to come and witness all of the creativity that runs through St. Lucy's. To close the week, on Saturday, February 7th, the sophomore class officers hosted our winter formal, with the theme of Starstruck in the City, pulling inspiration from the movie La La Land. It was a beautiful night with plenty of dancing and lots of fun from the students. The following week, ASB sold Valentine's grams that students could purchase and send to anyone from St. Lucy's or our brother and sister school, Damien and Pomona Catholic. Furthermore, ASB hosted our last sports rally of the year, the Spring Sports Rally. It was filled with so many fun games, such as a relay race displaying all of our spring sports. Hungry Hippos, rom-com movie charades, a giant teacher versus student relay tic-tac-toe match, and finally, our class cheer competition where the seniors joined each of the underclassmen cheers one last time to say goodbye to their school rallies. It was a huge success and a bittersweet send-off to our seniors. Moreover, our senior class is currently on our annual religious retreat, this year being Kairos 93. They left yesterday morning and will be there until Thursday late afternoon, growing both in faith and closer to one another as the class. Next week, St. Lucy's will be hosting our yearly Penny Wars competition. Each class is competing against each other to raise the most money in pennies while being able to sabotage one another through silver coins, dollar bills, and card readers. Throughout February, class officers hosted fundraisers hoping to raise money that they could put towards either their positive total or use it to sabotage other classes. The freshmen hosted an ice cream sale, the sophomores held a Pizookie sale, the juniors sold Starbucks coffee and refreshers, and the seniors sold both smoothies and milkshakes. Each class is very dedicated to winning this year's Penny Wars. Finally, we are in the middle of ASB elections, with both sophomores and junior preparing to campaign and run for next year's ASB. We are very excited in all of the candidates' enthusiasm and initiative they are taking to be future leaders of our school. We cannot wait to hear all of their great ideas and see how wonderfully they run St. Lucy's next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Very nice. As I'm just getting used to 2026, you folks are already looking to the next school year. That's, wow, great. I think I don't see any other student reps here, so did I miss anyone? No? Thank you. All right. That brings us to reordering of the agenda or any additions. Is there anyone wishing to change or add anything? Seeing none, we will not do such and move on to public comment. So I'd like to open public comment period. And again, invite members of the public to stand before this body and share your comments, asking you to fill out a speaker card if you have not already done so, and submit it to our recording admin. Once called upon, please come up to the podium, state your name, share your business, and please be mindful of the 3-minute count clock that I think there's a piece there to help you keep track of that, because you will be limited to 3 minutes in effort of time and allowing everyone to speak. So with that, I'll call up the cards as I've been presented them. Mr. Bob Moore, welcome.
Good evening. This city council is on record as saying it cannot find unhoused people. You drive around and don't find anyone, yet you complain that you don't get back adequate resources from the county for the homeless. This council is also on record as pontificating how pleased you are at taking away resources from people through Measure A, trying to stave off eviction. You created the circumstances that you find yourself in. This city government adopts an us versus them polarized approach based on ideological issues of a small minority of people, ignoring the pressing needs of the community, rising poverty and homelessness, and now healthcare. Right now, 1,000 people a day in Los Angeles County are losing their healthcare. 1,000 people a day. It's going to get much worse than this, as the bulk of the eviscerating cuts are scheduled after the 26 and 28 elections. Hospitals, nursing homes, clinics, ERs are all closing around us, and it's going to get much worse. The proposed county measure is, again, like Measure A, is specifically targeted in order to provide health care for county residents. It does have a sunset date as well, unlike City Measure Z that does not have a sunset date and which is a non-specific slush fund. This county measure both of these county measures are based upon transparency, traceability, and accountability. You need to do a better job at explaining your needs to the county for homelessness and healthcare funding. Simply to act disgruntled and say, we're going to grab our marbles and go home, isn't the way politics is played, and I can't believe that I'm the one coming here to say that to you. You used our public funds, our tax money, for legal fees fighting lost lawsuits against the county and the state. You fought against the LA County courts and the state when you enjoined the first Trump regime in opposing SB 54, vaccine mandates, diversity curriculum, second languages, book bannings, cashless bail, etc., draining our city coffers for nationalized ideological battles instead of nonpartisan city issues. This is poor financial management, and it's not good stewardship of the city. Once again, on February 10th, here you were, us versus them. Look around you. It's a blue-on-blue county. 3 out of 4 people in this county are non-white. You're creating the same circumstances that you complain about. Set up a medical fund for Glendora residents that receive dialysis, life-saving medications, respirators, medical equipment, insulin, hemophiliac medications, heart medicine, etc. Set the fund up. Help the residents. Focus on consensus-based local governance. Stay away from the scripted propaganda speeches. Thank you. Good evening. Buenos noches, gobierno.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Joe Cena. Welcome, Mr. Cena.
Good evening, City Council, City staff. My name is Joe Cena, President, CEO of the Glendora Chamber of Commerce, and since I'm going to talk about the bid manager too in the Glendora Village. First off, I want to make an announcement. The last month and a half or so, we put out for submissions for the next Glendora Citizen of the Year, and the votes are in, and this year's recipient will be Mrs. Kitty Garvey, a Glendora resident and owner of Crestwood Communities and several other businesses. And with her work with the library, St. Lucy's, St. Dorothy's, and many other nonprofits in town, I think she was very well-deserved, along with the other 4 nominations that the committee did also receive. The Citizen of the Year event will be in April, and the invitations will go out very soon. Also in April, which we moved it up because of all the stuff going on in May, we have our next Cuisines of the Foothills, a foodie adventure. That will be April 8th, 1 week before April 9th, 1 week before Citizen of the Year. So tickets can be purchased for that at cuisinesofthefoothills.com. Then talking about businesses, there are several ribbon cuttings and grand openings coming up. This Friday at 11, Milk and Honey Tea in the Village that opened up where the old shoe place was. It will be this Friday at 11. Then March 11th, Longevity Support Services, local consultant, helps people with housing, senior services, stuff like that. Will be March 11th at 11 a.m., location to be determined. And then also the new Better Sleep Center that's down on Route 66 in the old Tuesday morning lot. They will have a ribbon cutting Saturday, March 14th at 11 a.m. And then also in the village, upcoming is the annual wine walk, which that is March 21st from 6 to 9. Tickets are on sale for that at glendorawinewalk.com. And that's just a few things. There's a lot of other things going on, a lot more ribbon cuttings, grand openings, events, chalk walks coming up. Plus in the for the bid, which you'll get soon, is the annual report, which this council will be pleased to see this year. There is a balanced budget that's going to be proposed to you, so which I think is the first time in a long time. So, but a lot more to come, and we're busy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cena. Next up, I invite Mr. Gary Boyer. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Boyer, and I'm here tonight representing the Frog Committee. I think the word is getting out about what we've been working on, and I almost look back and think I wish we would have talked about a tax first because we got more people engaged, but we're talking about it at the end of, after deliberating a lot of other things. But I'm here tonight to express our appreciation and support for the council for item number 9 that you're going to be reviewing things tonight. We at Frog, we use the phrase, the city council has been extremely frugal with taxpayer money over the years, maybe to a fault. Our past city councils have always prioritized fiscal responsibility and short-term issues, and we've looked at those long-term issues as something that we can deal with someday. Well, that someday is here, so it's time to deal with them. As you know, we've been working on addressing the facility replacement issues and discovered problems that are greater than most Glendoras have any idea of. This council has been aware you made the decision to finally evaluate just how bad the conditions of our facilities are, and that's appreciated. But you also know how much it costs every year to put Band-Aids on things that really need to be replaced. Your item 9 discussion gives you the opportunity to address some of the issues we've come to find out about. It's also important to acknowledge that through Frog's efforts, we were able to bring an idea to the city that really hasn't been discussed yet, and I'm hoping you can get it on a future agenda. It's an additional option of some creative municipal financing that, that could also address some of these issues. To do that, we'd have to have a dedicated revenue source. And in reviewing the mid-year budget, I think that's possible. I think we might be able to find a small revenue source that could be dedicated to that effort. I'd also like to bring up a subject that's been discussed for a while, and we really haven't went anywhere with it, but I think it's time for the city to sponsor a subcommittee, for the council to get involved in a subcommittee to discuss these issues. It'd be nice to have 2 council members and probably 2 people from the Library Board of Trustees, and then some residents and other city staff involved so that we can have deeper discussions. As a citizens committee, we have limited resources and limited access to the options that may be available. So regardless as to what the city council decides to do, we're going to continue to look at all of the options available. We're communicating with the community and with the residents, and we're getting a lot of feedback on what's important to them, and we will continue this conversation. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Next up would be Mr. Frank Artura. Welcome, Frank.
Good evening, folks. Nice to see you all again. So, why am I here? A few weeks ago, I got a call from local property owner. He said he was at the country club that afternoon, and somebody asked him to sign a facilities repair petition or something of that sort. So he called me up and said, "Frank, what is this all about?" And I said, "When they asked you to sign the petition, did they tell you there was a parcel tax associated with that?" He said, "No, they didn't say anything about that." And I said, "That's unfortunate." He asked, "What is a parcel tax?" And I said, "Well, parcel tax is kind of like a mileage tax that's going around the state, but it's for real estate. So based on the square footage of your properties, you're going to be taxed if that goes through." So he says, "Well, how much is that going to cost me?" In his case, it's going to cost him about $10,000 a year in property tax increases. And he goes, "Wow, that's an unfortunate thing. If I knew that, I wouldn't have signed." So I started to do a little more research. Having access and knowing a lot of property owners in town, I looked at one of them because looking at it affects structures on property, square footage of all structures, including garages, parking garages, a lot of stuff it affects. So one of the property owners in town, as I'm looking at it, he currently spends $130,000 a year on property taxes. Based on his structures, his property tax is going to go up 50% to $196,000. That's a huge increase in property taxes. I'm not sure everybody in the community is aware what the math is on this stuff. And I'd like to see a lot more awareness get created. I agree with Gary Boyer. It'd be nice to set up citizens committees so people have a better understanding of this. But I don't think everybody really mathed out how this is going to affect people in the community. So I'd like to see a little more transparency. And as people are going around asking for petitions to be signed, I'd like to see them actually say, look, the facilities need some work around town, they need some attention, but there's a tax associated with it. And so long as folks are aware of that and they're good with it, God bless. But I don't like to see people get blindsided. So I'd like there to be a little more clarity going on in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Artura. Appreciate it. Before I close public comment, was there anyone else wishing? Mr. Sparling? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Fred Sparling. I own Classic Coffee in the downtown village, and I've been a resident of Glendora since I bought my first house here in 1970. So I've been a little bit long-term resident here. One of the things I'd like to point out is we're going to get an increase in our sewer tax from the county. The county is talking about increasing the sales tax, which will affect us. We're having a water bill increase, which will affect all of us. And this, please let us know and give us some more information about what you're talking about with this property tax increase you're asking us to get. Because right now, our sales are up, but our profits are down because we can't pass on all the different costs we've had associated with us. It's just every time we turn around, our suppliers are raising the cost of things, and we just can't do that because we've got competition. Also, I have a lot of people come in who are retired people, and they're asking me, what the heck? I can't even afford the property tax now. How would I afford a rate increase in the property tax? So please remember, we have a lot of retired people here in the city that this is going to hurt if they do increase the property tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sparling. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for all the comments. I will now close public comment and bring it back for member statements. And I'll start with Mendel. Welcome.
Mayor, thank you. And I only have one thing to say, and I love Luca Bella. I want you to know that I paid for this shirt. It was not a gift. And this is their last week in town, 16 years. And I would think that many of us have had occasion to eat there, meet there for all kinds of different things. And we're going to miss them, but I want to wish Chris, Lori, the very, very best. They have poured their heart and soul into this town and into that place, and we're going to miss them, but I wish them the very, very best of luck, and hopefully another place will, come in there that will be just as good. But I wanted to just say thank you for all of the memories which they have allowed us to, have. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Shauna?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing much from me in terms of member comments, except I did just want to clarify the bond measure is a citizen initiative that is not being promoted by council, and I know there seems to be a misunderstanding about that. I mean, we've talked about some of the different things up here, but that it's not a council or city initiative. So I just wanted to make sure that we are crystal clear on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Michael?
Thank you, David. This last Saturday night, I was invited to the American Legion over in Covina to be part of an honoring of the 4 chaplains by Mr. Jack Evanila at the Covina Post. On February 3rd, 1943, 4 chaplains, George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Pohl, and John Washington died rescuing civilians from the SS Dorchester after a U-boat sank a ship, and they came to their rescue off the coast of Newfoundland. The 4 chaplains gave up their life jackets for the civilians and went down singing with the ship. It was a moving remembrance ceremony, and Marcia Clark from the Examiner was there with me, and it lasted a couple of hours. It was very moving. They all spoke about something about those individuals and what they have done and what they gave up. And it's impressive that they still honor, after all these years, these folks that gave up their lives for somebody else. Also, I wanted to kind of report out, it was brought up at the COG meeting this last week, but I would imagine that we probably know about it. There will be a Glendora A-Line night market coming up on March the 7th from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Over at the A-Line station. It's sponsored by 99 Open Market, which I've not heard about before, but they're apparently doing this with some of the other stations, and co-sponsored by Metro. There's be live music, food, shopping, and a kids zone. There's online application for our businesses here. If a business wants to participate, they can go ahead and go to the website and put their application in and go ahead and see if they want to have a booth there or do something of that nature, highlighting their business. The website is 909openmarket.com. Thank you.
Okay, sounds interesting. Thank you, Michael. Karen?
I attended the market that they did at the Pomona station, and they had a lot of food booths, and they had a kid zone, and they showed a movie, so it was very entertaining. I just wanted to make an announcement to remind everyone that, especially over this last year, there have been a lot of programs that have been cut, their funding, and so there are people who face food insecurity. So this will be the 27th year that churches and other community groups come together to do the crop walk. That will be March 8th and 1:30 p.m. at the Methodist Church. We raise money to support St. Vincent de Paul, Shepherd's Pantry, and the Spartan Garden at Spartan Middle School. And so invite everybody to either donate to that or walk and help provide a meal for a person or a family in need.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And my report short, we have a lot of things coming up. The Chamber of Commerce alluded to it. There's many events going on, schools and things. March is very busy. I would encourage us all to engage in our community and go see what they're doing and help them enjoy their events. With that, I'll bring it back. Adam, Danny, any comments? Okay. Very good. That brings us to the consent calendar, items 3 through 8. Items on the consent calendar will be enacted by one motion without individual discussion unless a member wishes to have something pulled for separate discussion. Is there anyone wishing to have comment or pull?
I'll move items 3 through 7 on the consent.
Okay, motion by Michael, and do we have a second? Second by Mr. Thompson. I would like to make a comment on, where to go? Item 6 on the CDBG funding improvements in Glendora. And just note that, again, those funds are helping with sidewalks and streets and things in areas of town that are deemed most appropriate and can use them the most. So we're doing improvements for the community, and the areas that sometimes feel slighted in reality are not. They're getting those benefits once again. So good programs, and check out the maps and things on the agenda. It will show you where that work will be done. With that, we have a motion. I'll ask us to kindly vote on the consent calendar. The consent calendar items 3 through 8 are passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
7.
3 through 7. Oh, okay. Thank you. I
We can pass
had
it
a
if you
conflict.
want.
Oh, that, let's
We're-
pass,
We're gonna
pass on
miss a
8.
lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's probably not the, my apologies. Glad we're all paying attention. Okay, thank you. Okay, that does bring us to item 8, to conduct a mid-year budget review and adopt a joint resolution amending the fiscal year 2025-2026, and invite Finance Director and City Treasurer Kyle Johnson. I think this is mostly your show tonight, so get a chair and stay put. Welcome, Kyle.
That's how we tend to do the finance items. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So my understanding, if I heard correctly, is this item's already done. So I'm available for any questions.
We'll allow you to practice your speech, though.
So tonight, I will be discussing the mid-year budget review for fiscal year 25 and 26. On June 10th, 2025, the City Council adopted the fiscal year 25-27 two-year budget, approving estimated revenues and appropriations for the fiscal year 25-26. The mid-year budget review compares budget to actuals, evaluating the performance of revenues and expenditures 6 months or midway through the fiscal year. Adjustments are requested to match revenue and expenditure trends, recognize grant awards, identify personnel adjustments for efficient service delivery, and evaluate the capital improvement programs to reprioritize planned infrastructure projects. This slide starts what will be the first of two discussions tonight on the use of discretionary resources in the general fund and Measures EZ. Overall, the general fund and Measures EZ fund saw minimal changes related to department operations. Special police services and building plan checking revenue increased. The cost of police officer training and investigative tools have increased, as well as Community Development Department contract services in the building division. Public Works is requesting budget increases to maintain parks, trees, and landscaping to address supply and service flexibility. And for city staff in conjunction with regular contracted items. The major change in general fund and the Measures EZ fund is an update to reporting transparency. A change has been made to report more services directly in Measures EZ that were previously reported in the general fund and were provided for through the subsidy from Measures E and Z. A lot of these services in Measures E and Z are also reported directly in the budget with their own section, as well as sent out with everybody's water bill when they receive the budget in brief. It gives a highlight of the Measures E and Z services, both things funded in the general fund and in Measures E and Z. So these are the major areas of discussion from 1 year ago entering the 25-27 two-year budget process. A lot of them are still important today and continue to be discussed 1 year later. They are influenced by community surveys and are part of the 25-27 strategic plan, and as such were incorporated in the adopted 25-27 two-year budget. Many of the items are complex and require a multifaceted approach to address. The next two slides show the financial forecast for the general fund and Measures EZ. Detail notes for each line noted on the left-hand side, 1 through 22, are available with the attachment to the staff report. It would be illegible if I included the notes there. The font would be like 2. I'd like to highlight 2 areas on the slides. So line 11, so that's the transfers in for Measures EZ, and line 22, which is the ending balance or the reserves that will be a major discussion tonight. So line 11 represents the resources needed from Measures EZ to balance the general fund budget in compliance with the city's contingency reserve policy. As you can see, the number changed from the FY 25-26 amended budget to the FY 25-26 mid-year budget. This is related to the earlier mentioned change in program reporting between the general fund and Measures EZ. The remaining number represents the original deficit projected without Measure E included in the FY 2019-21 adopted two-year budget of approximately $3.5 million. There is a corresponding decrease in general fund expenditures. So with those changes, the overall expenditures and revenues don't change. It's just a change in where we were reporting in it for more enhanced transparency for the public and record-keeping purposes. Line 22 represents the council-adopted contingency reserve policy located in the city's adopted budget. The policy requires the general fund to maintain a reserve of 30% to 45% of prior year operational expenditures. Currently, the reserve is about 40%. So essentially, this represents anything your financial advisor would tell you. It's about 3 to 6 months of funding available in the absence of any other funding coming into the city. We would be able to operate for another 3 to 6 months. For Measure E, initially it provided funding to the general fund to maintain police services, repair streets, and maintain services to the community. Oh, I hit the button too many times. With the reporting update and voter approval of Measure Z, both measures now directly fund community outreach, public safety programs, homelessness programs, economic development and housing programs, library services to the public, street and road improvements, continuing to keep public areas safe and clean, and maintaining parks and city facilities. So lines 5 through 8 and 9 reflect the reporting adjustment, moving programs directly into Measures EZ and reducing the transfer out to the general fund. So item 9 is the transfer out to the general fund, same column, so the FY 25-26 amended was $5.6 million and was reduced to $3 million with the FY 25-26 mid-year. And then the corresponding expenditures and salaries, retirement, other benefits, and operations and maintenance all increased with mid-year related to the direct reporting and Measures EZ. This slide is a summary of adjustments in the other fund types the city maintains. Each fund within the summarized types operates with specific laws and regulations dictating how the funding must be spent. Special revenues contain gas tax, grant funding, local return measures, so Prop A, Prop C, Measure M, Measure R. All of these must be spent in accordance with those guidelines as set to the city, and may only be used on those specific projects and programs. A detailed schedule by fund for all of the adjustments is attached to the report. So some of the adjustments in those other funds include matching grant awards. So we have the Police and Friends Foundation to adjust for the amounts received related to those grants. Additional consultant services related to the Gold/A-Line project. Providing for water equipment repairs, increases in technology costs, and repairs to the city's water fleet. Here we have the water fund financial forecast. At this time, there are no major changes to the water operations and capital funds, as noted on the prior slide. It's AMI base station replacement, and their the operations and capital funds are budgeted and forecasted consistent with the November 2023 adopted rate study. And as with the other financial forecast, there's additional notes available in the attachment to the staff report. This is an easy slide. No staffing changes requested at this time. And so that concludes my report at this time. Staff recommends the City Council adopt the resolution before you tonight, amending the 25-26 budget, and concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Bring it back to panel for discussion. Shauna, would you like to begin?
No questions from me, but I appreciate the effort to be more transparent. I think, now of any time we need that, so I do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Thank you, David. What, no dad jokes tonight?
I tried to set him up, but he didn't.
Yeah, I didn't take it. Well, thank you for your presentation. Are we at a full year now of reporting from Measure Z funds coming in?
No, not yet, because it would have been approved last November, so not yet.
So that line item could increase because we're not reporting a full year yet?
No, we're receiving about what we would receive, because between Measure E and Measure Z, we are pretty close to the same amount as we received in our regular sales tax.
Yeah, I was going to say,
So,
would you mind, Kyle, walking through how we do the quarterly updates with HDL and how we would review any of those changes?
yeah, so with HDL, they come after the quarter after I think it's 2 quarters after a quarter end. So we just had the third quarter update. And so what they do is they walk through with us the results of our regular sales tax, our 1% sales tax, and then they go through also separately the Measure E, our 3/4% sales tax, and then Measure Z, our 1/4% sales tax. And they report to us what the revenue or the sales tax that all the businesses are generating, and and I guess how they're doing. So right now, when we compare Measure E and Measure Z, both are 1% combined, 75 and 25, and then we have a regular 1%, and those are about equal. They're both about $11 million.
And E and Z operate the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
So the revenue source from E, when we have historical, matches exactly what Z would be too.
Right, but the point I was getting at is, do we have a full year of collection?
This year,
It was approved in November 2024. The taxes didn't start being generated to the city in April 2025, so we haven't hit the 1 year mark.
yeah, so this fiscal year.
About 2 months.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, so are we projecting what it might be based on historic?
We're basing it based on HCL's estimate and what Measure E is, since
Okay.
they're calculated
Yeah.
the same way. And I would just add, because sales tax is received in arrears with true-up payments, you basically get 4 payments for every 1 quarter. The estimates included in the budget are still on target with what we had estimated at the start of the year.
Okay. We had our briefing about a week ago or so, and I asked about corrections to the organization chart and a typo in the bond that was coming due that was actually mislabeled. Is that being corrected in this under the budget, or is this a separate document altogether?
This is a separate document, so those corrections would be made in either with the mid-cycle budget, where we reproduce that portion of that budget document, or with the 2-year budget document.
Yeah, and I would just add that they're administrative in nature, so
Yeah.
those can be updated anytime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do we need $100,000 for JM Diaz for consulting for the A-line?
So, okay, so there's just additional closeout responsibilities for JMD with the Gold Line and.
So it's closeouts, not new work,
and the
it's old work?
Not new work. I don't know.
It's the continuation of the JMD amounts that we had with the Gold Line as we go through all the closeout of the tasks. They're the engineering experts as relates to the Gold Line. So that work will continue through the closeout and full transfer over to Metro.
So they still have more work to finish?
Some, yeah, minimal. If you recall, that amount was 7 figures at some point. So this is a much lower threshold.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had asked in the past about what we spend fiscally on homeless services. Has that been reviewed and calculated?
How much we spend on homeless services?
Annually?
I think we provided that. It's not all in one place, right? Because it's based on calls out for the police department. We do have a specific homelessness program that's run from Recreation and Human Services, and then any housing that, I guess, expenses that community development might incur relating to just programs there to provide housing for homeless individuals or unhoused individuals. I don't recall the number off the top of my head, but we can get that for you.
Well, the budget and brief, as I spoke with Adam before, it's about a little over $700,000 in the budget and brief. That's for Measure E and Z. The 2-year budget is a little over $800,000 over 2 years, but I understand that there's more
That's correct.
that's there that we have to go through and do an
Yeah.
accounting for.
And that's the difference between a direct and indirect cost, right? So the direct costs that are to a singular consultant, for example, that does nothing but homeless services is encapsulated in the homeless divisions of the budget. Other costs associated with, for example, a percentage of staff time in the police department based on calls for service, our community impact team, would be more of an indirect cost. If staff time wasn't being used for homelessness, it would be redirected. We also have contracts, for example, as the council knows, for a cleanup. And so sometimes in homeless cleanup, there are some of those related costs, but that same contract's also used for oil spills or other hazardous materials as well. So it's really an ongoing accounting throughout the year. Plus, we take a look at the percentage of staff time associated with homelessness and come up with more of an indirect cost. So if you're looking for the all-in cost on homelessness, I know we've used a number more than $2 million, and whether it's $2.5 million, $3 million, it really is dependent upon the year, but the draw on city resources has been pretty consistent for the past 3 to 4 years.
Okay. Back in December, I'd asked how much money we have in works but not spent on the roads when we had the PCI report. Any idea how much we have hanging out there?
I know Moises is back there, but generally speaking, from a CIP perspective, the money in the budget that you have is already set aside for future projects. And I think one of the things that's really important to note is that you could have fund balance in a streets fund, for example, anticipated at the end of, say, this fiscal year, but we've anticipated to use that fund balance in out years as part of a larger street project. Let's call it Lone Hill, Glendora Avenue, so on and so forth. So all the available street funds, generally speaking, have been budgeted for both current and future projects, especially in the 5-year CIP.
Yeah, but do we know what the differential is between what was spent and what's allocated? There's
I don't
probably a
have that
number
right
out
off the
there.
top of my head, no. For specifically street projects and
Correct.
funding?
Correct.
I don't know what that number is off the top of my head.
Okay. Also was brought up in December about possibly bringing in more engineering in-house because of the cost for the outside services.
No, that's not been a conversation that we've had.
That was a question that was brought up back in December.
No,
Is that-
that's not something that we have considered.
Okay. Does that make sense to do that to lower the cost?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
And generally speaking, it's because the level of engineering required and the requirements to look at things like bridges and water tanks and water pipes and streets and roads and all of that infrastructure, it's not, that doesn't exist in one individual. And so the city has actually been really successful in looking at engineering contracts. In fact, we have, Kyle, do you know how many engineering contracts we have? 4?
Yeah.
If not more, 4 or 5, and council's approved panels, so that we have engineering expertise in various areas. It's very similar to our IT methodology, where we do have some in-house staff, like we do have in-house engineering staff, and we supplement all of those individual industry-related experts with the private sector, which can provide us fractional FTEs in order to make that work happen. So no, it wouldn't make sense at this time to bring in additional engineering staff. We have looked at some additional staff options for like project management, for example, like a capital projects manager, to help ensure that all of those contracts are moving efficiently. And I think that's kind of the broader conversation. So if that's what you're referring to, then yes, absolutely, that is something that we have thought about doing.
Okay. Just a couple more left here. The efficiencies of the city, I was able to go through the warrant report. I found some things, talked to staff about it, and you guys are looking at some of these things. Is it possible do we have the bandwidth here to look at efficiencies, or do we have to go outside to look for firms? Because there are firms that do this, and I would suggest that we try to, across the board, try to find a 5% savings across somewhere about $3.5 million from our general fund to help augment some of the CIP that we're looking for. Again, somewhere close to $500,000, $400,000 or $500,000 I found from the warrant register if we were to make some changes.
I mean, I don't recall that total when we were talking about some of those items, but I mean, the staff is always looking at ways to be more efficient. I think it really comes down to a conversation, in every single expenditure that the city's had is available on the website. You can take a look at. So, Councilmember, I don't recall the $500,000 figure or what 5% would represent. 5% of the general fund would be a lot more than that.
No, that would be a lot more than that, but me alone finding through the warrant register.
I'm not aware of how you come up with that number, but happy to take a look at any of the information you have and sort of take a look at how that affects the expenditures. Yeah, absolutely.
Part of what staff does in preparing these budgets and everything, do we go through an efficiency study as far as things that we really probably can do without?
So most of your budget, and as Kyle mentioned, is really based on a set of criteria. That is your strategic plan, that is your community in surveys, and a lot of your budget is based on sort of what we call some of the foundational reports, your PCI study, your parks master plan, for example, your trees, so on and so forth. And so the city, and most of the budget, $125 million, the vast majority of that is very scripted to what it can be used. Your discretionary amount is very, very small. Mm-hmm. In the general fund, for example, about 40% of the discretionary spending overall, 65% of that is in public works, police department, and community economic development. So not including things like parks and recreation and library services. So when you wrap in some of the things like personnel-related expenditures that we have and the personnel at the city, the discretionary portion is very small. And so the conversation that we've had before is really programmatic in nature. I think one of the worst things the city can do is take an across-the-board reduction in expenditures. Doesn't really do anything but limit services to the community. A much better conversation, and I think things that have borne out more efficiently, is looking at services and what services do we not want to provide to the community. But always, yes, you're absolutely correct. To the extent we can do something cheaper, we can do it more efficient, that is always something that we bring to the city council's attention. We've done that in IT, we've done it in landscape management, and we've done it in other areas throughout the past 7 years that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I would never look at anything across the board, strategic only.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Mendel?
Just on that last point, I think it's important that we all understand that we're the ones that set the goals. and 2-year goals. And I think that if that's something that we want to look at in terms of specific cuts, then we need to incorporate those within our goals. And at this point, I don't think that we've seen the need to say we want to cut X, Y, Z. And I would agree that an across-the-board cut sounds good and certainly is effective if that's what you want to do. But I would rather look at specific areas, if there are some, to take a look at that, because we're the ones that set it, and then they're the ones that implement it, and so we just need to own that. Kyle, great job. I think it's really important that all of us, and when I say all of us, everybody that lives here, is taxed here, it works here, plays here. If you really want to know what's going on, you need to read all of these updates. The basic staff update was very well done, but you need to read attachments C, D, E, and F. Those are very specific, and I think that we all need to understand that. And so I would encourage us all to, do that. I'm confident that we've all read those, but that's an important thing. On Measure E and Z, thank you for being more specific. I was here when we implemented Measure E and Z, and when I say we, that means the people. The citizens voted, and there were causes and effect because of that vote. And I know that the ad hoc group that was a part of E really stressed the fact that we need to be specific in what those funds are going for. And so thank you for taking yet another step to show exactly where those funds are, because I think that that's really an important thing. There's an important point here that I think I was not aware of, and I'm sure that many people aren't, but from an audit standpoint, now you give the audit report, right?
Yes.
But I've come to understand that there's 10 of those being done every year in different areas.
Yes.
And I think that's really important for all of us to understand, that there are 10 different sets of eyes that look at all areas of what our operation is. And that's really important, because we're the ones that fund everything, the people. And in my banking life, it's never fun to have an auditor come in or an examiner that have enormous power, but it is very important to have those expressions made of what we're doing, and when we miss it, understand that, and we rarely miss that because we don't get a lot of exceptions. But I think it's important that the city knows that we are being looked at, and I think that that's just an important thing. From a credibility standpoint, we are AAA. Less than 20 cities in our entire state are AAA. And what does that mean? What does that mean, Kyle?
That means that we get a benefit on the interest rate, that we are a safe investment, right? So when we put debt out there for other people to buy, to invest in the city of Glendora, that allows them to be secure in the knowledge that we are going to be able to meet our financial obligations and pay the debt payments on those bonds over whatever the term of the bond is, somewhere up to 30 years usually.
And it's, I'm not going to name the cities that are, but I think we'd all be surprised at the cities that aren't. Some of them are big, big names. And the councils in the past have worked hard to make sure that that we're safe, we're strong, we're sound, we're ready for a rainy day, literally, or a fire, or an economic turndown, and that will spill into item 9 when we talk about that in just a bit. But that is because we have set aside funds, and you said that reserves are currently at 40. That is exceptional, and I'm an advocate and will be, as we talk about item 9, of looking at, is that more than enough or not enough? If it's more than enough, then how much is? And are there things that we can do with some of the extra that we might all feel like that maybe we have? So thank you for an excellent update, but especially the openness that you have shared on measures E and Z. With that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mendel. Karen?
Thank you, Kyle, for making this always easy to follow and read. I appreciate that. And in terms of accountability and financial management, I'd much rather have Kyle and Marie doing that than anybody by the name of Elon. So I think that you are able to make sure that money is not being wasted, but doing it in a very constructive way that maintains the integrity of our programs and our staffing. I was here when we had to make cuts during the recession, and that's never a good thing. And so being able to maintain the services and not look at something across the board or any other way to have to reduce things, I think is a good thing. So thank you very much, and look forward to hearing what you have to say in item 9.
Thank you, Karen. I wanted to go back to a comment that was made earlier about Measure Z. And if I recall, Measure Z was a motion to capture revenues that were going away with the county's latest adjustment, and to actually be able to realize monies intended for homelessness and human services, and to redirect that specifically, not as a slush fund, but as a focus for that fund to go there. So when we look at Measure Z and Measure Z, E and Z together, it looks like $11 million, but 8 plus is E, and 2 something is Z, and that we are in fact addressing that toward our homeless and human services area as a focus. Is that
Yes,
am I
that is
accurate?
correct. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So it's not just a slush fund to help bridge the gap. It's both of them are all focused to service-related departments and expenditures.
Yes.
Right? Okay, great. With that, I have no other comments other than thank you, and I will.
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes, ma'am.
question. Councilmember Alawas mentioned an efficiency study, and Adam, maybe you know, like, what does something like that cost?
So there's a variety of companies out there that want to come in and look at your telecom costs, or look at your phone costs, or look at your energy usage, and they advertise that they can come in and do some facility improvements and energy efficiency, and essentially you issue debt for some minor improvements and pay it off over a period of time. There are about 4 main vendors that are out there that do this type of thing for city. The city of Glendora has actually used some of them in the past. It's actually how we ended up with the solar project at the teen center. We have looked at some telecom costs in the past as well. Some of the other larger scale efficiency studies the city's undertaken in the past actually correlate with a 2003 article in the LA Times when we looked at recommendations for how to cut costs. But we have done things when we, for example, looked at third parties to provide landscape services. We saved about $700,000 in that front, reinvested that money into facilities to try to offset some of the issues that we know we've had. So we can and have where there is savings. A lot of some companies provide solutions that are basically cost neutral to you. Sometimes you get some minor improvements, and other times they're not worth the effort, but it is always worth it to go down and see if we can save money or spend less and provide the same level of service.
I mean, do they look at like just a specific area? Or I mean, it
Sometimes.
sounded like he was talking about some like broad strokes, like
Different types. It'll cost you about $250,000 to do some of the larger scale evaluations. Other previous agencies that I've been at, some of our surrounding agencies have done those types of studies. In fact, we'll talk about in the next item, actually, we had a citizen advisory committee that actually was initiated just prior to my arrival in late 2017. That looked at a bunch of things from land sales in the city to other things. So those types of studies, and look for the council member to provide whatever clarification he wants, but they do come in a wide spectrum of packages under the heading of efficiency. Sometimes they're cost reductions, and other times it truly is you get a better price for the same service.
okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mendel?
Yeah, can I just add to, that last year, I think it was last year, we had a study done on our fees. And, I'm a big fee guy, right? And we found out some things that we needed to know, that we weren't doing well. And we took some steps to adjust fees. And, I think that's an important thing to always do, to target an area and say, hey, can we do more here? And specifically, fees, we did that, and I don't know if that was driven by us as one of our goals. I think it was.
Yeah, that's correct.
Versus staff. Staff said yes, because that was one of our goals, so we did that. So, I think that there is merit, but I also think that we have looked at that. Now, I wouldn't want to say that we looked at efficiencies in that. We looked at cost, but cost does bleed into sometimes the efficient way of getting things done. So, anyway, just a thought.
Well, and I will recall that oftentimes in Public Works is a great example. We'll have a contract out for work, and 9 times out of 10, the management of that project comes in, and we actually came in under budget and had a little savings from it. So it's
True.
not always an overspend or an exorbitant change, but
Yeah.
we manage it well and watch it and come out ahead. So that's good. Yes.
Well, just really quick, I know that Moises is looking at removing our water service, our bottled water service, and putting something into the wall. So, that's going to reduce some costs. Little things of that nature add up to a bigger number. Depends on who's looking at this and what they can possibly do. So that's what I'm getting at. Things of that nature that can add up to a larger number. We had the discussion at one time about the quarterly reports. Do we print them off and mail them like we do now, or do we make it virtual? Something to look at that saves probably $400,000 or something a year, because of about $75,000 a quarter to mail those things out and print them. But things of that nature, do we do this? Do we not do this? Is there a benefit or not? Things of that nature that, again, can add up to a bigger number.
And again, with the Glendora report that you're managing, that's a service, right? So if you want to reduce the service to the community, there is savings, but that's a perfect example of a service that could be reduced. Yeah.
Okay. With that, do I have a motion to
So moved.
Second?
accept the project? Okay. Motion by Michael and a second by Mendel. I'll ask us to please cast our votes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Brings us to item 9, a use of one-time funds, and the recommended action is to receive an overview on one-time funding opportunities and/or provide direction as needed. And it'll be a collaboration of reports, I believe,
Yep.
beginning with Mr. Raymond.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll give Kyle a brief breather during the presentation. I know Marie's hanging out there in the back in case, oh, she's right to the side. So in case Kyle and I are unable to answer questions, Marie will come to the rescue. So gonna give a little background, and we kind of got into it during the mid-year presentation. It's a good thing. So these two items, both the mid-year presentation and the one-time use of funding, do go hand in hand. A little bit of background here. So Glendora really and truly has restored financial stability over the past 7 years with the passage of Measure E and pension obligation bond, the restructuring of which saved us cash flow savings in an amount of a little over $1 million a year. Upon my first arrival, the city was advertising shortfalls in a 5-year projection of $1 million a year. When we got in and worked with the council, we realized that that shortfall was really closer to $3.5 to $4 million a year. And through a variety of changes, sometimes it was enhancements, as we just talked about, to restructuring how the city worked, moving the building division into community development, harmonizing our landscape and park services, to taking a look at water operations and police operations. The city really has strengthened its financial position. No more significantly than the city council and 3 of you on this council were a part of the original passing of some changes in our financial policies. Kyle mentioned in his previous conversation the amount of money that we're transferring into reserve and future pension obligations and future technology and funding or pre-funding some of our fleet purchases, for example, and our future liabilities that have really set the city up in a position to be successful. Those things have culminated not only some additional projects being done and earning of the AAA bond rating, which the councilman mentioned is less than one of 20 cities, but really this story and the full narrative is in your staff report this evening, provides the history of how we got to where we got. These past 7 years, the city council, through financial discipline, has really allowed itself the opportunity to make some of these difficult one-time funding discussions. There will always be more wants than haves, and the priorities of the outstanding wants or the decisions that the city council will have to make. Again, the results have been significant. We've had tremendous investment in infrastructure. If you take a look at the parks, they are remarkable. And although it is hard to believe, for the first time in a decade, our street condition actually went up slightly. It's the first time since the 80s that we can tell it hasn't declined decade over decade. So while very small improvements, it's still an improvement nonetheless, and the council has a pretty aggressive policy where staff needs to find about $3 to $3.5 million additional dollars a year over the next 7 years to move our score up into an area that it wants to be. We've had significant investments, as this council just previously discussed, in public safety and homelessness. We've added sworn staff positions, dispatchers, a crime analyst. We've added homeless services. We've looked at housing. We've added more enforcement and cleanup activities. We've also made significant investments, like I mentioned, in our parks and added some staff to ensure that those parks are being cared for and used appropriately. We've had major investments in technology, new financial system, new permitting system, new code enforcement system, and the like, which will allow staff, as the council member mentioned, to be more efficient in the future, especially when those are done. Suffice to say, on top of all of that, staff has also been aggressive. That number is actually more than $60 million in grant revenue over the past 6 years. We have been really aggressive with trying to supplement the taxpayer funding and going out and getting more of it. On January 13th, as part of our facilities discussion, staff committed to coming back with a conversation on one-time funding, a broader conversation. this council is familiar with the difficulties in one-time use of funding. Read really briefly from the staff report, and basically it says, the city council is well-versed in the need to utilize one-time funding in the most efficient manner possible. For example, in May 2023, the city council received a report estimating approximately $8 million in needs subject to further study for moderate repairs to the library, including plumbing, electrical, mechanical, and structural upgrades. When a potential grant opportunity requiring a significant city match for up to $4 million was ultimately unavailable, City Council and Library Board unanimously concluded that committing $8 to $10 million for repair with no guarantee of resolving underlying facility issues was not the most prudent course at that time. This decision was not a reflection of the library's importance, but rather an example of the careful fiscal policy trade-offs required when limited resources must address multiple critical needs. As the city reviews the opportunities and costs for significant civic center renovation aimed to address decades of issues for future Glendorans, the City Council has continued to evaluate the needs of many infrastructure challenges, including streets, the library, the city public work yard, and the use of one-time funding that we have tonight will aid in that conversation. Let me go forward. So in your handout tonight is a larger one-page document that splits out the use of available resources one time. These funds are discretionary, meaning that the City Council, generally speaking, has broad ability to direct these resources for any use that it so desires. They're not hamstrung in grants and special revenues and city and, county, state, and federal requirements. These funds have been set aside. So the handout this evening, which we'll go over in sections here, is organized two ways. One, it's organized by fund. The general fund, a Measures EZ, our joint use agreement, a pension fund, and it is organized by budget year. So 2-year budget years, the current 2-year budget year, 2025 to 2027, and future budget years, so about a 6-year look here. The very first item that we've talked about here is the city has a reserve in its general fund. You saw earlier this evening that amounts to about $18.3-ish million currently. The city has a fiscal reserve policy that says we should keep between 30 and 45% in reserve. We are currently at 40% of general fund reserve. The excess differential between 30% and where we're at now is about $4.6 million. Use of reserves can create challenges as it relates to having to reduce costs in a recession. It also could impact bond ratings, and happy to share what some of those impacts may be. Additionally, the City Council has planned for receiving, but has not yet allocated potential property sales. We have received funding from the San Jose property, which was $3.99 million. City Council in 2024 allocated $1 million of that when it was received, which was just recently for future economic development activities. City Council has the ability to allocate that $2.99 million now. Additionally, as part of our last presentation 2 months ago on the Dale site, the city anticipates receiving $2.1 million upon the sale of Dale. Dale still has to go through Planning Commission and City Council approvals, but we anticipate if all things go well, that could be next fiscal year, so by June 30th, 2027. Including in 25-27, I'll move in the out years. There are some options for other local agency development. The City Council has taken a look at when people ask for a rezoning of land, whether it's another public agency or not. The city has the ability to require payment for future infrastructure and needs of Glendorans. It could be in the out years based on conversations we've had with those other local agencies, between 4 and 8 million over the next essentially 3 to 5 years. So nothing anticipated between this year and next year, but potentially by June 30th, 2029, and potentially then another 4 million by fiscal year 2031. You will see a couple conversations tonight regarding pension and OPEB. So in the general fund, we do have things set aside for other pension benefits. Largely, these are related to retired employees that receive some portion of future medical contributions. The vast majority are related to public safety. The city does have a liability. Kyle will have the exact number, but we use this set aside to fund future obligations and hedge against that liability. However, the city council can use some of that funding. As it relates to the pension fund, one of the really big hallmarks and one of the things that the city really faced challenges with was its pension issue. A couple really important things have happened as CalPERS has changed the amount of PEPRA employees or those employees hired after basically January 1st of 2013, or those employees who have not been employed in a city for 6 months have helped decrease the future pension obligations. The city currently in its pension fund has set aside about $13.8 million for future pension obligations. To put that money in perspective, the city currently has a pension obligation bond with an outstanding principal amount of $50 million. Our unfunded accrued liability pursuant to our CalPERS actuarial reports are currently $20 million, although we do anticipate with the better than anticipated returns in the market that liability will go from $20 million to about $10 million. But CalPERS has not produced that information yet. Some of these funds should be used for pension-related matters. Just to give you an idea, the amount of money here set aside, one of the financial policy goals is this would allow the city a couple years of using reserve for future pension costs should there be a down economy, buying the city council time to make policy decisions as it relates to services to our community. One of the things that strikes me, or one of the things that I will always remember, is Councilmember Thompson and former Mayor Boyer, who spoke earlier this evening, came to my office after the passage of Measure E and said, we never want to be in this fiscal position ever again. How do we stop that from happening? And one of the things the city did through its fiscal policy changes that the city council championed and adopted was to set aside money for future pension obligations that could be used if the city were to get into a difficult fiscal issue or if the economy had a downturn. And here you've bought yourself a couple years of using these reserves in lieu of paying for pensions out of your operating budget, allowing the council time to make service-related decisions to the public. We anticipate some smaller amounts in out years that could be available based on the performance of Measure EZ in the general fund. Speaking of Measures E and Z, we currently have a fund balance we anticipate of about $2.8 million or $2.28 million, $2.3 million in Measures E and Z. That has not been allocated for anything yet. Usually this set aside money has helped the city council achieve its financial, maybe unfunded items in the strategic plan. And we do anticipate some additional amounts in the out year budget cycles as well. So we're going to get into two separate conversations here on current capital funding. Councilmember, that your question earlier about the amounts that were funded but not spent. So here is a portion of that information for the question you asked. So this city council has previously helped participate with Glendora Unified School District to pay for its pool project. We've already spent $600,000 in assistance to the pool. The city does have programs for that pool in the summer and is helping participate in the repairs that are currently underway. City Council also directed staff to set aside up to $900,000 in additional funding by the end of this two-year budget cycle, so by the end of June 30th, 2027. The project at the school district actually came in slightly under their expectations. If the city council wanted to reallocate this funding, they could do so. There will be several potential needs for this funding and potential joint projects with the school district as well. But by the end of next budget year of June 30th, 2027, you may have another $900,000 and able to allocate to other projects. Currently budgeted but not spent, the city does have projects in CIP related to City Hall. For roofing projects, the City Council has previously provided authorization for changes to this council chambers, some minor expansions, some addition of patios on the outside to allow for overflow and people to have access to what's happening inside, outside. On occasion, we do fill up the council chambers, and previously we were having to walk over to the bidwell, and that back and forth just isn't beneficial. And so this is where the action happens and the policy makes. So the city council wanted to ensure that if you came to a council meeting, you could be close to the action. So, but those project funds have not been spent yet. And so the city council could redirect some of that $1 million that we've set aside for some city hall or civic center projects to other priorities as well. So in total, when you look at everything in sum, excess fund balance in reserve, and when I say excess, it basically means those above the minimum requirements, currently about 6.8 million, 1.9 million in reallocation of CIP, estimated property sales of 5.1 million, pension set aside of 13.8, and helping offset future OPEB, which are other basically pension benefits that are decades old, for example, that's about 4 million. Use of the funding, especially in the reserve accounts, can create challenges in both future bond rating or borrowing costs and limited flexibility should the city council need that when coming up on financial downturns. They do happen. The city, especially the last 7 years, has been really good at navigating those hurdles. As the city council knows, in your current 2-year budget, our revenues came in about 2.5 million less than anticipated or we were budgeting. Not that we had an overall decrease, it's just that the slowdown of the economy and to some extent inflation lowered estimates in things like sales tax, and we've also seen some lower than anticipated, although minor increases in property tax. But so the passage of Measure Z that you talked about, Mayor, in addition to providing for homeless services, also helps stopgap, the shortfall in revenue that we would have otherwise anticipated. So there are several things that the city council may need to look at when making policy decisions. So let me just give you a couple of them. These are by no means a comprehensive list, but things that the city council, we know based on direction from this body, will need to consider. So you could, for example, consider a strategic use of one-time funding for street improvements to bridge existing gap of 3 to 3.5 million to try to raise our PCI from 63 to 70 over the course of 7 years. It's possible you could use some one-time funding for targeted use of one-time funds now, backfilled with future funding opportunities. For the example, we've talked about sales of property and future development of other local agency-owned property, not local agency property owned by the city. This policy direction could be used for other streets or city facilities. The city staff, when it was negotiating its pension obligation bond, Kyle did a tremendous job in providing the city with optionality moving forward, beginning with no penalty prepayments and starting in 2029. You saw the amount of money we've set aside for future pension obligations. We could use 15 million of that to pay down a larger chunk in 2029. That would free up 1.5 million annually for basically other uses, whether it is streets or facilities. The city council will also need to look at a prioritization of city facilities. Examples are the difference between the city's public works yard and the library, roofing needs, electrical, HVAC, central heating of existing city facilities. You'll need to look at the impacts of operational flexibility and services to the community during economic downturns. You use all your available one-time funding now, you're limited in your uses in the future. Impacts on future liabilities with more or less street funding and sidewalk projects. One of the things the city council has really pushed staff, and it's been mentioned previously before, is to find additional money for streets, which we have done and continue to try to do. This helps limit future liabilities for trip and falls and potholes and other related measures too. So money there spent actually saves money in 2 ways. And also the impacts of bond ratings and future borrowing costs. This is a small snippet of the policy decisions City Council will have to consider when you talk about use of one-time funding. And many of these items I would add are and have found their way into your strategic plan, and various items have ranked highly on the city survey as well. And I will just leave you with one brief synopsis of something that was spoken about earlier. So As I mentioned previously, when I began in the city had already undertaken or already started a citizen advisory committee, which was aimed to look at various ways to either cut costs or raise funding. They looked at property sales. They looked at using the sheriffs instead of a police department. They looked at revenue measures. For example, the city is the only local agency, I think, outside of Claremont that does not have a utility users tax, for example. So in some agencies, that raises between $5 to $8 million a year if we use like Azusa and Arcadia as examples. Ultimately, that group, which was made up of many community leaders, residents that just wanted to get involved, and past council members, ended up recommending to the city council that they put what ended up being Measure E on the ballot. In fact, many of those items, though, that group recommended showed up in your strategic plan and have found their way forward, including the re-addition of a potential development of South Hills. So the city has undertaken that in-depth look as recently as 2018, and those were well-taken exercises and really helped try to provide as much transparency in the efforts that the city council undertook. The last thing for me is we understand that fund or government accounting is difficult. It doesn't make sense, especially if you are a private business person and you're trying to make sense of it, or we have certain credentials in the government world for accountants. In many ways, we require and ask hiring accounting managers to have more requirements than a big three accounting firm. In order to try to make things better to understand, we've included 2 attachments this evening on the city's cash pool and just the budget in general that really provides some general level insight into why the city has to spend the way it does, what forms of funding are restricted, and why it is we can't just take money from a cash pool and spend it on whatever we want. So happy to answer any questions there. And so with that, Mayor, we ask that City Council receives this overview and provides any direction necessary. And with that, Kyle and myself and Marie and any of the other department heads that are here this evening are happy to answer any questions that you have. So thank you very much.
Okay. Just to clarify, Kyle doesn't have any presentation, but you're ready to answer questions. Okay,
Yes, he is.
Perfect. Did not want to misunderstand. Thank you all. Complicated at best. With that, I will bring it back for discussion. I'd like to start with Karen.
Thank you. Yeah, we found out in the Colby fire, as tragic as that was, it was a small-scale disaster when you think of some of the disasters, yet because we had our reserves, we could get vendors in here right away, pay for expenses, and not worry. Should we have a large-scale fire? Should we have an earthquake? That reserve goes like that, and that is one of the reasons why it has been so important to maintain that reserve, because if businesses are closed, you're not generating sales tax. If people, you want employees to get paid even though things may not be working. And so there's so many scenarios, which is why it's always been important to keep at least that 30%, if not more, so that we can respond to those kind of things, because we do live in the golden state of disasters. So that's one piece of that puzzle. And then again, with the one-time funding, we have looked at some of these things in our strategic planning and trying to be wise, because as with any budget, you could say, oh, let's do this, oh, let's do that, and pretty soon, any and all available resources are gone and you haven't met the priorities you set out to meet. So it's really important to look at that bigger picture and look at those priorities. And I think realizing that how unpredictable the financial market is, that protecting the pension obligations and having those resources is very important, because there's been years when CalPERS did not perform well and we were in a big mess. So I think a lot of these things that the council and staff have worked hard on establishing are there for a reason. And so I think that if we are to take any cash from anywhere, that we really need to be thoughtful, because while on paper it may look like we're sitting on a bunch of cash, we really aren't. And we need to look at which priorities we need to meet first. And we hear a lot about streets, so keeping that money that we've allocated to capital improvements, I think, is important. So that's all I'll say for now. And I'll let one of the financial wizards here, I know Mr. Thompson has all kinds of thoughts about numbers.
Well, rolling into that segue, you're up.
Well, just on one note that Karen talked about, the Colby fire was something that could have been a whole lot worse. But a K-rail is not cheap to rent. And we had, I don't know the number of them, but literally miles of them. And I believe that they were up, some people will say that they were up for 10 or 15 years because they're ugly, and they were up a long time, but they were probably up maybe 4 years. 4 years. And, somebody's got to pay for, that, and your city did. And we were able to do it without having to go out and get a loan. So Karen's right. That's an important thing. Thank you, staff, for talking about this. Adam and I have been talking about this for several weeks, off and on. And so this is, may God bless you, whoever that was. Cindy, okay. There's a lot here, and I think it's important to talk about, and it's a relevant thing to talk about, and for a lot of different things. Some of the undercurrent, though, that I think that has brought us here is ideas that, well, the city must have enough, so why do we need FROG and why do we need a parcel tax? Let's just pay. And that's just not true. We don't have the spendable funds inside the budget to meet the necessary objectives that FROG has laid out, because that is an enormous thing, because sadly, we haven't kept up with all of the buildings that needed to be fixed and maintained in a proper way. So this is a discussion that's really important, and it's going to get down to some heavy stuff. Questions, big ones, are going to be asked. Do we need, fill in the blank? And those are hard things to talk about. I was a part of the ad hoc group. In fact, I think I was one of the people that appointed some of those folks. And Adam's right; they looked at everything. They looked at selling the land up on top of the South Hills, and to some that would be you just don't even talk about that. But they had the courage to look at a lot of different things. And Adam's right, some of those things have made it into our goals. And I think we need to probably go back and look at what those folks said and looked at and noted and see how right they were, and maybe in some ways how they kind of missed the mark. I was a part of another group that met probably a month ago now to talk about alternate source of funding. And that is still out there. It's on the table. That source is used by companies that are huge, AT&T and B of A, and I could name others. And so it's a credible source. It's a credible way to obtain funds. And we're looking, my point in saying that is we're looking at everything. And I applaud what Gary's been doing with Frog and his group, but we're looking at all kinds of different things. And part of that is having a discussion such as this. 40% is very strong. Personally, I think it might be a little rich. To cut right to the chase, I think I'd be open to looking at 8 million to cut off of that and use in any way that the council would deem is important. But I'm not. I'm only just one guy. We also need to, and I think the five of us do, we are very attentive to what our surveys say. And over and over again, we want more places to eat, more places to shop, better roads, and less care for those that are unhoused. Those are the four biggies. And but when you look at just say roads, Adam, I heard once that it was $1 million a mile. I don't know if that's accurate or if it's low or high.
Depends on the type of street project.
Depends on the type of street.
Slurry seal is much cheaper. Yeah.
So if we want to cut, or if we want to use 5 of what I deem might be a little rich, well, you're going to get 5 miles. And the city is 20 point some square miles. So you and we need to say, well, where are those 5 miles or at? So these are tough things, and we need to prioritize what citizens want. Streets are important. I've lived here for 35 years, and I've probably hit every pothole that is known to man here. Gary's right. The city has kicked the can down the road for 50 years, and if it's not a parcel tax, then how are we going to get these buildings fixed? The library is crumbling. In 5 years, it could be red tagged. And that's a sobering thought. So if we don't do this, then what are we going to do? And efficiencies are good, looking at different things. But at the end of the day, I truly don't see the amount of money that we need within the budget. There's just not that much there. So I've said what I would agree to. I think for this night, it's important to talk about this, get all of our views, and then give staff a directive of some sort, because I don't think we're anywhere near saying, okay, let's just take a number and we're going to do this, because I don't know that we have enough, enough facts to understand how much things are going to cost and what is the number one need. And so with that, I'll stop.
Okay, thank you, Mendel. Shauna?
Thank you. This is a lot. I have a lot of thoughts that I'll do my best to articulate. I'm glad Mendel brought up the Frog Committee, because that's honestly in all of this, and in our briefing and in the last few weeks as we've been discussing some of this stuff. The thing that has struck me the most is the request to have this conversation tonight came during our January discussion about the Citizens Initiative when former Mayor Boyer was here, and we're discussing the Civic Center and funding for that, and this came about, and it concerns me that it just feels a little misleading that we were looking at a potential parcel tax, or the citizens group is looking at a potential parcel tax, and then we're having this conversation of, well, where can we find one-time funding? And so I want to make sure people understand the scope of these numbers, and that the numbers that we're talking about tonight, like Mendel has said, like they don't even scratch the surface of what the city needs. And so I just want to make sure people understand that. I mean, you know, we're talking about like tens of millions, you know, if we were to like use every cent tonight. And I mean, the scope of the needs right now in our city, the Civic Center project that Gary was talking about, we're talking about 125 million. And all the needs across the city, I added it up of conversations that I've had, and it's like 800 million. So, I mean, while it's important and we have work that needs to be done, I think it's just important to understand the scope of what we're talking about, you know, which is why I think Gary and his group are undertaking the Frog Committee and their endeavors, is because it's a big nut to crack. So anyways, it keeps coming back to me that like, okay, I don't want people to think that like, oh, we talked about this, but this is the alternative. We can just find some savings and we can do that. That's not what the conversation is. Personally, it's really important to me that as we're having this discussion, which I think is critically important because, you know, just as the newbie here on council, it is very apparent to me that the can has been kicked down the road for many, many decades, and not as a bad thing. I think it was former councils just, you know, trying to be prudent and very conservative, but we can't keep doing that. At some point, we need to have the conversation, but our residents in Glendora really value the services that the city provides. And this discussion, I think, is going to have to go at some point to cutting services. And I'm not okay with that, because I am out there, I see, you know, whether it's our community services and families or seniors or you know, our homelessness efforts, like those are all really, really important services. And just for me, I'm not comfortable touching those. What I would like as part of this discussion, Adam, maybe is if staff could put together a list of our most urgent needs. I mean, I know we have, you know, streets are important. We hear it all the time. You know, what's the most urgent things that we're looking at, and not just streets, just across the board. Just so I think for me that would be helpful in understanding. Okay, we have X amount of money that we may or may not spend. Where do we need it the most? As far as the reserve, you know, I've never felt more like my father's daughter, and he's very frugal, and so he'd be very proud. I like our AAA bond rating. I think that's important. I think that having the maximum amount of money set aside for emergencies is important. And so, you know, I don't know what that number is, but I know in talking to Mendel during our briefings, I feel lucky to brief with the financial guy. You know, you have to find the sweet spot. You don't want too little, but you don't want too much. You know, I don't want to hug too little. I'd rather, you know, hug too much. So that's just something that's important to me. At what point do we risk losing our AAA bond rating? Like, what's the number?
It's really a confluence of events. It's ongoing revenue, it's the market conditions. They look at development activity in the city, they look at major liabilities that the city may have, they look at a bunch of different types of things and come up with the rating. So the reserve is one element. Currently, we're at 40%. They like to see between 3 to 6 months and operational reserves closer to the 6-month threshold.
I mean, I also don't want to let that pass too. I mean, I wasn't aware that we had that rating, and I sit on council. I think that's an important piece, and I'm proud of our city and staff and former councils for getting us to that point. I mean, it's like less than 20 cities in the entire state can say that, and we can. And so I'm grateful for that. I mean, yeah, we have some potholes and we have things in the city that need to get done, but you know, I think we've been good stewards of savings, which is a good thing. So I don't know. I think, you know, this is a larger and a longer conversation that we need to have. I think it's going to be a difficult conversation. That's kind of my jam. I like difficult conversations. So I think now is the time to do it. I think we should not continue kicking the can down the road. But it's not just a tonight conversation. I think it's a big thing. So with that, I'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Shauna. Michael?
Thank you, David. First off, Adam, this report is really well done. I really enjoyed reading it because it gave some hope, if you will, in something, because I didn't expect a number that size. So it was definitely well thought out, and some risk with it as well. With that being said, did a little bit of research, and about 20 to 25% in reserves is what the norm is for many cities. In practice, most cities are probably around 5% at best. And I've checked with some of my colleagues in some of the other cities, and that's too risky, but they're having some issues, obviously, with that. On the Citizens Committee that was talked about before, the ad hoc that Meta was part of, structurally, can 2 council members be part of that Citizens Committee legally?
I mean, so I know the city attorney is going to make sure that I don't say anything illegal here. So city councils can create a variety of subcommittees it so chooses. The issue obviously is having more than 2 council members a part of that, whether it's other boards and commission members, the same number applies because our boards and commission members are 5, right? If there's 7 of you, that number's 3, so on and so forth. So it really depends though on what it is, because if it, for example, is a council subcommittee, then we get into the whole Brown Act committee, and then there are just some additional requirements, not that they're bad, but it's additional staffing requirements and publications and stuff like that. So obviously, if we're having a discussion, depending on what the discussion is, the level of information or what is confidential could or could not be utilized. So long way of saying 2 council members could participate if the city council decided to create a citizen committee again, but only 2 council members.
Michael, I just wanted to make it clear that I didn't serve on that. I was the mayor, and we all got to appoint, I think, 2 people, and none of us served on that. It was completely a citizen-led group. So I just wanted to be clear.
Thank you for that.
I wasn't on that, and none of us were.
Well, to extend on what Mr. Boyer said about perhaps maybe we should have a citizens committee or a subcommittee of the council.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a citizens committee. The citizens committee would be organized by the citizens. It wouldn't be established by the council, but you could have a council subcommittee that was established.
Can you invite citizens to that council?
You could invite citizens to attend those meetings.
Danny, in theory, could the council create a body that has certain number of appointees, which could include 2 council members?
Well,
Drum roll, please.
I mean, I think depending on the action by council, there's probably a way to make a lot of those things work, or a subcommittee for the subcommittee, but I know this sounds, anytime you involve council, it becomes complicated. No, but I think depending on the direction of the council on that matter, or any matters this evening, the city attorney and I can sit down and come back with various parameters and allowances. Fair?
yeah, and I would just advise that it would be likely the best path, which we can come back with more information on, would be a subcommittee established by the council, and then that subcommittee would seek advisors from the community that were made up of citizens.
I would like to see that. I think it's appropriate and prudent, particularly with the work the staff's done on this report. Again, the report was well done, but then how do you put that money to work if we choose to put some of that money to work? What do you do with it? And so I had, in January, when we had our last discussion, after that I put together a group of engineers, architects, citizens, developers, and we talked about some of the issues that we have here for facilities and how we can best address them most cost effectively. And we came up with some great ideas. A Butler building, steel building for the maintenance facility, which is a fraction of the cost. We already have one in town. We have the water yard, that is this Butler building. And just for the building itself and prevailing wage to assemble it without infrastructure or TIs, it's about $70 a square foot. And then you still have to do the other things as well. But compared to traditional construction, it's a lot less expensive. And then with the library itself, it's because the engineering folks that you had out there, which I don't have all the engineering information, but they just did the overview. I don't think they did any non-destructive testing to the library. But they did.
Sorry about that. They did do 3 or 4 core samples, but not anything in the ceiling as it relates to some of the beams.
So the direction was a patio cover over the top of it, which would be lightweight, no shear because it'd be open walls, things of this nature, but it's something
Just
that
really quick on that, the report said absolutely no structure on top.
it would be onto the pillars, onto the outside, and also into the surrounding.
Councilmember, that report said absolutely no structure on top.
Well, I haven't seen the report. I've asked for it, but I haven't seen
You
it
guys have all had copies of it in closed session, Councilmember.
in closed session, but I don't have it. And that was what, 2 years ago?
2.5, yeah.
So don't have it. So anyway, there's other opportunities. I know that we need to fix the electrical, plumbing, HVAC system, mechanicals, and things of that nature. But I think that if we bring the right people in that have had experience with that building, would actually help us move forward and maybe seeing if that's even a solution to solve the library issue. We have 2 issues. We have the library and we have the maintenance yard, which are probably our 2 biggest issues, plus all the other ancillary facilities that we need to maintain that we haven't been maintaining because of lack of dollars and personnel. But I think the start, going back to what Gary had mentioned of maybe a subcommittee or something of that nature to study this further, bring it back to council with some of the findings, and to be able to move forward. Then you're inclusive, you bring everybody together, and you come up with a solution. No matter what that is, at least you have buy-in across the board for what was discussed so that we can have a real discussion moving forward that all of us can buy into. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be probably painful in certain areas. Secondly is I did a stress test on floating a $20 million bond without doing any changes right now, lowering our threshold 30% of reserves, and it would cost about $1.2 million annually to do so without any changes. We wanted more, we'd have to go find some other funds. That was with what I have done off to the side without using your one-time funds. But there are solutions out there. If we want to look at them, we can either agree, disagree, but we need to have that discussion moving forward. So I would like to see if we can put a subcommittee together and look at these numbers from this report so we can move forward. I don't know what the council feels on that, but I think it'd be prudent to do so.
We look last year, I feel like in our June meeting, we talked about the library, because I commented then that we came up with a number of somewhere like 50 to 70 million just to like maintain status quo, because I made the comment about throwing good money after bad, and like at what point do you just start with something fresh? I have concerns about that.
The
That's a
library,
lot of money.
that was $76 million was for a complete redo of the
So
library.
I think, yeah, there's,
About 25 to 30 million was the suggestion to bring it up to a fairly stable level. They had lesser amounts of like about $8 million for some Band-Aids and things of that nature.
Yeah, but we don't even know, like that, it's still unknown if that would even solve it. I mean, they've done things over the last 50 years thinking that, oh, this will be the fix, and here we are still.
There are, if I can just provide some clarity, I think we've discussed so many numbers and so many related infrastructure that it just gets confused in everyone's mind. And I think one of the things I'd point out is the city provided a report, and it's very long, and it's been attached number, that we have 50 million in deferred maintenance today, right? Deferred maintenance and facilities across the board today is $50 million. That does not include a potential new public works yard. That does not include a potential or significantly repaired library. That's just deferred maintenance to bring things up to levels today. We know we're short on 3.5 million streets, but for the library itself, the action is actually, I think it's May of 2023. Staff comes to the city council after closed sessions in November. Well, that comes later, but we provide an estimate based on a structural analysis of the library that recommends, and this is 2023 prices, between 8 and 10 million necessary for not just some strengthening, but also for some HVAC, electrical, plumbing, as the council member mentioned. What's not included in that estimate, or what the report recommends, is that the city council also engage, or staff engage, additional consultants as it relates to weatherproofing, and undertake some additional destruction testing. One of the concerns is, or was at that time, which needed to be additional studied, is that the foundation of the library, as it relates to the cement, the hardness, so to speak, of the cement is only a fraction above what it should have been when it was built in the 70s. And this concrete gets harder for many years after it was poured, that there was some concern that the additional footings were not there. Additionally, the footings themselves, the issue being, are not, and what we shared at council in that report was, if you look at the original drawings for the library, the calculations state that you should be able to stack 3 rows of F-150s on the Bidwell Plaza. They recommended, hey, 1,000 people only, which is far less than that. And we recommended, when you have large-scale events and people are moving around and not even distribution of weight, and with other setup and things on top, that number be reduced to 500. They absolutely said no additional structures necessary with people that would basically make that space unusable. The issue with instructioning was some of the something called torsion on that facility, all of which is said. That facility's undergone strengthening in the past. I know I heard that we had reached out to former city employees about their experience with that facility as well. And so in looking back through additional files, some of the structural calculations, we did some strengthening on the back wall library, for example, don't tell us how much additional capacity the roof would have. Additionally, we've had the Friends Foundation added on, which was aimed at partly help shore up some flooding that came in, and also some structural integrity of that building as well. And those things have not stopped the leaking from happening, as well as the issue with how that roof is just comprised in the first place. We have tried for 52 years to stop the water from coming in and being intrusive in the library, to no avail. It is possible that a fix could stop it, yes. But that fix then, depending on what is required of that facility, would take on a life of its own. All of which this city council member is, no, we don't know if there is a fix out there and what that cost would be with very specific assurances that will stop the issues that we're having. And we also know that those fixes are going to be expensive. The city council has not, as was mentioned earlier, come up with a ranking of what facilities are more important or if streets are more important. So some of the conversation this evening, and whether that's in a committee or whether it's to the council or whether it's a special presentation, all of which is important to ferret out, because all of you are correct. You have limited dollars here. If we want to talk about another $1.2 million in the general fund, we need to talk about reductions of services to the public. And what those services would be. And maybe it's limited impact, and maybe that's the area the city would go. I'm not a big advocate of issuing debt in the general fund. Neither would any of your governmental agencies or bond rating agencies. That said, it definitely is an option that the council could consider in the future. So just to provide a little bit of clarity, Councilmember, you did make the comment about throwing, I think, bad or good money after bad, if that was the issue that has been the concern of this body and the library board previously as well.
So I've been in contact with some of the longtime contractors, engineers on that building. And it's also in the report that you mentioned, they said that you have to get some additional engineering services to find out really what's going on with the building, if anything. The cracks that are noticed in there, from my understanding, were there prior to the structural enhancements, the seismic enhancements that were done. And so we need to ferret that out to find out really if that's correct or not correct.
Yeah, staff has photographic documentation that some of those cracks have continued to grow significantly after those repairs were done.
So I also understand, too, that the plaza, every 2 years, there was a plan to have it sealed every 2 years, and I don't think we've done that in the last 2 years. I don't think when the last time we've done the seal. On top of that, there's weep holes on the north side of that where the water comes out because it's a flat roof. It was never designed, it was not designed for a one-story, it was designed for a two-story with a roof on top. So, flat roofs, they give.
Absolutely.
They should never have done. They should have put the second story on there. So, but again, we're not going to solve this tonight. However, I would like to have this subcommittee established. If I can I'll make that a motion. If I don't know if I can get a second and see if we can establish that, or do you need that, or you just?
Yeah, you need a
would need a
second
second.
and approval by a majority.
Can you clarify what the subcommittee?
Subcommittee would to look at these one-time funds, look at the facilities that we have, and its best use within the safety margin to use some of these one-time funds in some of our facilities. And step outside the box, as it were, get creative.
I might hold that thought
Sure.
on that motion. I'll jump in and segue a bit. Looking at it and doing some math and things and coming up with, if we were to include the trust funds, the 115 trust funds, and rob from those, and do the reserves, the pencil sharpening, we're about $32 million. Then, okay, we have a small, to me it's huge, obviously, but a big bag of money. And then we have to then figure out, okay, how are we likely going to pursue this or utilize that and maximize its capability, just filling dents in the process. We have a big car with lots of dents in it. Where do you start? And we're going to have to make choices if that's the course we go. Obviously, it'd be fun to be able to say we have an ongoing revenue source that we can start putting a list of priorities and the funding's coming. That's pie in the sky and it's wishful thinking. But in the case that doesn't happen, then we need to come up with another alternative of what to do. I'm not a fan of going after the pension fund reserves because there's a city about 45 miles east of us that stopped paying their pension funds when they fiscally got upside down. And guess what? Their retirees are struggling today for it. They got screwed. They are not getting the pension that they signed up for or that they contributed to. So that's not a good service. I don't think we want to be guilty of that. And we certainly cannot depend on CalPERS performance. So we need to have that reserve to be able to pay our way on the pension obligations. I think we need to stay away from that.
And that can be something that can be discussed in a subcommittee.
Perhaps, okay? But to look at and that subcommittee, and I will second that motion, that let's create a subcommittee to prioritize what those needs would be if we don't have a steady stream of revenues in the future. But we need to figure out, what are we going to do? Because 161 miles of streets doesn't go very far with excess. We have a 7-year plan to try to get to 70 on our asphalt index, while streets are going to continue to deteriorate in that 7 years. It's kind of a difficult balance. You were going to...
Yeah, and I would only say, I think part of the conversation that the council has, just in order to provide staff better direction, is a lot of what we're talking about is very broad, and I would hate to ask a subcommittee to look at things without the city council providing some additional information, like how much money does that group have to play with? Because that would greatly change potentially what becomes important or not important, or even what the scope are. Are we just looking at capital, or are we looking at operations, and to what extent? So even with the citizen advisory committee that was done, my understanding previously, there were some general guidance that was provided into the areas they were looking for, else, and for the sake of the council and understanding what the task is, and for staff to provide that level of support, it'd be really helpful to understand, if the council goes in that direction, what those parameters are.
Okay.
And I'd want to know what the expectation of staff is, because a lot of this work has already been done, and to go back and redo it and take staff time to recreate some of these same documents and things, I'd want there to be parameters on that, because
Yeah, and I don't
throwing money.
disagree. I think that we have a lot of this information, and so to go back and recompile it, put it in an order, and if we have some funding numbers that we could draw on. So if we say, all right, here's what the funds could be, here's what the facilities needs are, and then try to determine what a priority might be. But sadly, if we were to say 14 million without taking out the pension plans, guess what, folks? That's about one project and some overflow. So then we got to figure out, well, the overflow can always be asphalt, but it's...
We already
It's not-
have the facilities report. It's
Yeah,
in 2 documents. We already have, it's already done. We
Yeah, I'm
don't
not
have
looking to
create anything more.
recreate that, just...
No, we don't have to.
But
It's already there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I would even venture to say that some of those assessments would need to be updated, which is an important aspect of trying to develop some of those scenarios. But we're talking about 2023 numbers, we've seen CPI, plus there is some information missing as relates to the library facility.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of a project starting now of, well, if not something, what else? Well, let's start exploring what the what else might be, not with a concrete direction of a land point, but that'll give us some choices. And we've got some great input already, so let's explore that. But
I think I'd like a better understanding of the scope and the authority of this kind of a committee. Like, are they an advisory committee?
We report back to the full city council. with
So they're not,
recommendations.
okay, so they're just advising us. They're
Yeah,
not.
yeah, I think it's
There's-
research and advice would be my thought.
Okay.
There's no decision-making authority.
No.
No,
by the
no,
committee.
I would agree.
Not with 2 council members.
The council would need to provide direction, like the city's strategic plan, what's important, what's not. I mean, I think there's a lot of details, I think, in parameters that the council would need to put on a project like that, and not to hamstring it, but to provide so council knows exactly what it's getting back from that exercise. I think that's an important aspect as well.
And I think, to Karen's point, staff recommendations of what's already been done, but also staff that has to work in these facilities that, so that should help prioritize some of the need based on what they're dealing with. And we shouldn't ignore that. We don't have to work in this every day. It's different. We need to respect the perspective that the staff is working.
So what is the purpose of this committee? I'm confused now.
I think compile some of the overall collection of information on the needs, not recreate, not restudy it, just compile it, looking at some of the choices of the expendable funds or discretionary funds that we might be able to get. But the other thing we have to realize, we spend this once, it's not a replenishment source. It's gone. It's not, and if we were to go borrow money, that's at a huge interest rate. That'll quadruple the amount we actually got. So that's not a prudent choice in my mind. Just isn't. Sir?
I have two things, and I'm not going to let Kyle off the hook. So Kyle, you know, I've been approached by different people saying, well, you know, you got 125 in your investment account. We actually have 126 million, but 125. Why don't we just use that? So can you enlighten us and the public that that's just not a piggy bank, that's not already, I mean, the staff report does a great job, but most people don't read a staff report. They just look at the 125 million and go, well, man, you got it. So can you kind of break it down? Because there's not 125 there to just use for whatever.
Yeah, correct. So 125 million is all the city's cash pooled together. So this is the discretionary funding we've been talking about, the restricted funding, it's water funds, and we pool it all together and we use that to get a better bang for our buck on our investments. We have 60 different funds that we manage, all with different requirements that need to be followed with the 10 different audits that we have, whether they're financial performance or compliance-based. So those are all things we have to take into account when we're looking at the cash. So in addition, depending on the investment or where we're holding the money, we can still be held to the $250,000 insurance requirement. So same as an individual. So if I had to find, you know, somewhere to park $125 million under $250,000 at each financial institution, I'd have a lot of different bank accounts on top of all the restrictions that I'd have to find for all the accounting and regulatory compliance. So what the 125 million or 26 million represents is really every dollar in each of the individual 60 funds that we maintain. Some of that must be used on streets, some of it must be used on transportation. Brought up water before, so anything that the ratepayers pay must be reinvested back into the water system, whether that's services, you know, administration or operations or capital projects, right? That was part of the rate study. So overall, it's, I guess, all of the 125 million is not just money available for spending. It's all set aside for specific purposes that, as we've seen, the city sets up 5-year plans for multiple funding sources, the general fund, Measure E, water, and beyond that, for our capital projects funds. There are funds in the out years, so meaning fund fiscal year 28 through 30, that have multi-million-dollar capital projects in there that aren't represented right now against that $126 million. So, for instance, the the Glendora Avenue is a $8 to $10 million project. We have, with grant funding coming up, Finkbeiner Stormwater Capture project, which is like a $20 million project. So these are all future projects that may require some resources that are currently invested or currently part of that pot of $126 million. So it's not all readily available. We can write a check for $125 million and have a new civic center tomorrow.
Good, thank you.
Cool.
You can go sit down because I'm not going to ask you this. I'm just going to make a safe statement. I support what Gary raised about a subgroup, but I cannot support acting on it tonight. When we appointed the ad hoc, we had a mission. We knew who was going to appoint it, the number of people, who was going to chair it. There's a lot of stuff that goes into a subgroup, And I'm in favor of doing that, but I think we're rushing, and I think we need another couple weeks to kind of noodle on this, maybe put some guidelines out. And, you know, I don't want to vote no, but I will vote no if we just say, well, we're just going to appoint a subgroup without any rules and without any shape or form.
Then why don't we
Because I
appoint
think
2
that is
council members to
ludicrous.
work with staff to put those rules in place?
I think we can wait a couple weeks. I mean, what's the rush in
Well,
doing
no,
it now?
but who's going to?
But I think staff needs some policy direction from
Yeah,
the council. If I may, not just to provide maybe some clarity here is, we don't even know from a staff perspective, if you're going to ask me about staffing resources, I don't know what the staffing resources would be if it's, for example, if it's only capital stuff, okay, understand. Like if we're talking about operations and go through that committee level again, that committee had 4 or 5 staff members and multiple department heads that participated across multiple meetings. And it ranged from operations to reductions to outsourcing to not providing services. That's a much different undertaking. And so if that is going to be something the council wants to reengage again, that's going to be a much larger draw on staff resources, which is okay.
I think
We
we're talking
just
about
have to
capital
decide-
improvements.
And if it's strictly capital improvements.
Strictly capital
and-
improvements.
And putting stuff out, I just think I'm happy to come back if that's what the council wants, with optionality for what they could look at. I really need to get policy direction from this body if we're supposed to stay in line with the strategic plan here, if you'd like to take an alternative path for some of the actions that you've already provided staff direction on. Finding street funding, for example, and stuff like that. So maybe it can supplement it, but I just think we need to be very clear on what the expectations are so that we are using our time effectively.
So then I'll alter my motion to ask for staff to get involved with putting a scope together for a subcommittee for CIP,
It's strictly CIP?
strictly CIP. Capital improvements. And bring it back to our next council meeting.
Michael, I don't know what you're rushing to achieve here, when I just said the council needs to know who's going to appoint it, who's going to chair it, what are the numbers, what are the dates, when do we want a report back? We can talk about this throughout these next couple of weeks and engage staff. What is the urgency?
I think you just missed-
At 9:15 to appoint a subgroup.
I think you just missed my point.
No, I did not.
My
I heard you clearly.
clearly was to ask staff to come back to us at another council meeting with that information.
So we're relegating this all to
Only to-
staff,
No, only
which
to.
they're
no,
overloaded now.
No, only to come back
Well,
to
that's
us
what you
to
just said.
help us with the scope for us to discuss, to take those next steps. Not for us to do anything, but.
So
for
what is
staff
the rush?
to Start the ball moving.
The ball is started. We've had a good discussion.
No action.
Well,
I'm supportive of what this action is.
I can
just
see-
want it clear.
I can respect both directions, and I think that we need not create the committee right now or subcommittee, but let's agree, we need to explore this and put together what we think we want and come back with a better proposal.
Yeah, and ask staff to help in
do
that
that.
process.
It's a direction, but it's not a firm create such a subcommittee. We need to define that, define its scope, and work together on what we think
Is
a reasonable.
pursuant to that conversation, and I think staff can help assist there, is there a certain dollar amount that you have in mind for this group subcommittee?
Do you need why do you need a dollar amount?
Because if it's $5 million, we're not talking about new facilities here.
Well, that's,
To be determined. You put together a report here of over $30 million. Let them
The
think back.
scope will be vastly different if we look at different dollar amounts of that committee,
Right,
right?
but not looking at any dollar amount at all right now. You have one-time monies for our discretion, for us to debate and discuss, for you to come back with a scope to us, for us to discuss it, create the committee eventually, and put everything on the table, and then come back, report out to council, let the council decide on some of the recommendations.
Well, and I think, yeah, and the committee would need to would come back with options, various
Correct.
options
Yes.
with the various
Absolutely.
numbers that the
I
full
still-
council.
Yeah, I still think council needs to decide because what the comfort level is on the dollar amount.
To
Yeah,
be
I feel like
determined.
I don't know, I feel like I'm not clear, and I do get a sense that I feel rushed. Like, I agree, I think I'm not opposed to a subcommittee, I support a subcommittee, but I want to have a better understanding of what the scope is, what their authority is, what the numbers are that they're looking at, like, and the timing.
And what the purpose is.
Well, that's the whole reason that was the whole reason for the motion, to have staff help develop that and bring it back to us, and then we discuss what that is and move forward. We're not developing or establishing the subcommittee now. We're asking staff for the help, to help with the scope, to come back to us, and then for us to refine that scope and either choose move to forward or not. We're not making a decision tonight.
But staff isn't asking for this subcommittee, so I think they need more information to do this. You're saying, hey, we want a subcommittee, so here, you go
And
tell
we
us.
gave them a parameter, or I gave them a parameter of CIP projects with some of the one-time funds on the table, and then to come back with recommendations and options for the council to discuss.
Sounds a lot like our strategic planning meeting.
Well, obviously, we didn't address it, did we, with the one-time funds?
Well, I think we had those options and we made
Without-
choices.
Okay, without putting another burden on staff as a project, can we agree to have a meeting and just noodle some of the ideas and
Sure.
some of the listings, and from there, maybe we can come up with a direction of recommendations to pursue, but not
Help
take
develop the
actions?
scope?
Yeah.
Sure.
Would that work? Yeah, I'm not looking to give us another research project. We got tons of those, and
Yeah, I think.
No, and
All
then
that
if
and-
you come up with some idea, then you could put that on the next agenda for us
There you
to decide. So we don't need to vote on anything right now, because I don't even know what it is you're wanting us to vote on.
is that a fair direction?
Yes, I think staff can, more than happy to come back with looking at some capital-related items and things that a subcommittee could look at and things for their considerations or policy direction the city council may want them to investigate. I think we can do that, yes.
Are you going to want any input from us in developing that?
Well, we would, as I understand the mayor's comments, it would be to come back so this body can have that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Sure.
staff would need a ton of policy direction. But I think we have enough to come back and at least ask you, hey, we talked about these things, now we talk
Yeah,
about these
well, we
things.
can individually.
If we do
contribute.
this, what do you want the parameters? Because staff always wants to do the best job we can to provide the information to the subcommittee. The narrowing of the scope in terms of what it's about, I think will greatly help with that process. So we're happy to come back with future policy direction on this topic for that the council would need to provide staff.
How much time do you need?
A month, maybe? I'll try to come back in 2 weeks, but probably more like a month from now, the first meeting in March. Just because we have other items already
That would be
underway.
the next meeting, first meeting in March.
What's that?
Would be the next
Oh,
meeting.
sorry. It's already the second meeting in February. So by the end of March, thank you very much, Councilmember. That is absolutely correct. So first meeting in March, we're doing strategic plan update. We're looking at some legislative stuff in that meeting. So probably the second meeting in March at the earliest to provide some framework. But I think I can make that happen.
Thank you.
For the record, so, Michael, you will be withdrawing your motion, and David, you are agreeing to?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then we will motion to table this item to the second meeting in March.
Continue it.
Continue the item.
No, we
You
can
don't
come back
need
with a
to
new item,
continue
yeah.
it.
Great.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the input. Thank you, team, for all the great presentation.
And since we are tabling it, I do need a required motion and a second.
To receive and file.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by Michael, second by Karen. May we have a vote? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Roxanne, for that follow-up. All right, that concludes our business. Any closing comments? I have one. was pleased in my travels today to report that I observed our contractor out starting already on the pavement improvements and patchwork that we approved at our last meeting. So thank you for that. Great job, and stress tested by walking on a couple of pieces, and they look pretty nice, so not bad. So progress is coming. Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Since you're pleased about some construction stuff, I am pleased as well. I understand that we got the last bid in for the repair of this roof, and it will be in staff's hands, I was told. Is that correct? To make that happen. So to everybody that has inquired about the repair of the roof, it's closer than ever to happening. So thank you to staff. Appreciate that.
You mean you're taking the beach blanket off? Okay. With that, all right. With that, any other questions, comments? No? Okay. I will adjourn the meeting at 9:25. Thank you, everybody, for participating.